it always takes me so long to start going. Once I get going, I'm fine. But the getting going, that always takes me forever. I keep looking down because I have a script in front of me, a script which I have already stopped following because that's just how we roll here on the Reading with Steven channel. We write scripts, we take the effort to write out our thoughts, and then we ignore them and just, fly by the seat of our pants. Hence why the editing process takes as long as it does. But we're going to remedy that today because the phrase of the day is short books get short videos. The last two videos on Isaac Asimov were very long videos. They took me forever. But today we have a short book. It was 150-ish pages. Very short. 144 pages. We can talk about that quickly. We can't because actually Sherwood Anderson's book is... I haven't introduced the book yet. Hello. I haven't introduced myself yet. Hello. I'm Steven. This is Reading with Steven. Here we read and talk about books. Specifically, I'm trying to read all of the books that I have purchased in over the past many years and talk about them in an intelligent and intelligible manner, something which I have already failed at. Today we're reading Winesburg, Ohio, which you already know because you saw the title of the video, hopefully, by Sherwood Anderson. It was a short story collection from 1919, and it's very good. And that's the book we're talking about. Winesburg, Ohio is a short story collection in which each story is from the perspective of, or at least in regards to, a member of the Society of Winesburg, of the titular town of Winesburg, Ohio. A fictional city, albeit there is actually a real Winesburg, which Sherwood Anderson did not know about when he wrote the book. But it is not about the actual Winesburg. It's a fake Winesburg based off of Sherwood Anderson's hometown when he was a young man. At the beginning of the book, in regards to its short story nature, there is a kind of a separate metafictional short story called The Book of the Grotesque. And in this very short metafiction, Sherwood Anderson discusses how a writer, such as himself, woke up one day and found that he had these ideas for the grotesqueries of life. Now, he specifies that in this specific instance, grotesqueries are not ugly things, although they are somewhat uglified, but rather they are the cave paintings in grottos. That is where the word grotesque comes from. And it is these kind of fictionalized pictures of people that he is writing about. In answer to critics who had said that the book was ugly, that it was putting down ordinary Midwestern people, Anderson said, quote, referring again to the people of the book, the people of my own Winesburg, they are people I personally would be glad to spend my life with. Certainly I did not write to make fun of these people or to make them ridiculous or ugly, but instead to show by their example what happens to simple, ordinary people, particularly the unsuccessful ones, what life does to us here in America in our times, and on the whole, how decent and real we nevertheless are. And I think that's a very telling quote, what America does to us, what being successful or unsuccessful does to us. Because despite being written or being published in 1919 and taking place in the 1890s, I think it's a very modern book. It is an incredibly modern book that deals with problems I think that even we today are dealing with. The ideas of success and unsuccess, the ideas of love and the problems that arise when we are incapable of loving or incapable of being loved in return. And all of these kind of issues arise in Winesburg, Ohio. And to that sense, it's very it feels like a very contemporary novel, despite taking place so long before. Part of this is because it is a an American realist work, a work of American modernism, and it takes the ideas of literary realism that had previously been mostly aimed at European upper middle class and upper classes, and then again to the American upper classes. But instead of applying it to those, it applies to the Midwestern kind of lower class and lower middle class people. And this is, I think, a very new idea, something that hadn't really been seen before, even in, say, Mark Twain, in his books, in his Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer, which were lauded for the realistic nature of their dialogue and how they talked about poor people of the South and whatnot. Well, that was in Missouri, so I don't know. Missouri, not really the South, but southern-ish. That's gonna make a lot of Missourians annoyed. Every Missourian, all one of you who watches this video is gonna be really annoyed that I referred to Missouri as the South. But this book is not really about. It's not really about realistic dialogue so much as the realistic nature of the people. Because even in Mark Twain, it's not a realistic situation in which the characters find themselves in. It's kind of this idealized version of boyhood and idealized version of American relations with each other. Whereas Anderson takes a much more, I don't want to say cynical, because it's not a cynical book, but it takes a much more true to life. It talks about the actual disappointments, why people, flounder in life. And I think to that effect, Sherwood Anderson does does something that I don't think had been done before, or at least very, very possibly that I just don't. That it's new to me at the very least, if it was not new to the world. And if there are other books that do this, then please inform me of them, because I would very much be interested in reading them, because I thought this was an amazing book. I think when it comes to short stories, I think it is imperative to talk about the themes of the stories, because there is always a set of themes that tends to run through a set of short stories. That's why they're put together. They're not just written willy-nilly. It is collected by the author for a specific reason. And to this effect, the stories of Winesburg, Ohio, while they are superficially connected in the sense that they are all about the characters of Winesburg, Ohio, all about the people of the town, there is still a number of themes that go throughout. Obviously, the success and unsuccess. But specifically, the ideas of sex that goes through the book, or that kind of runs through the book. We have this idea, I think, about the past, which is that, and I think it comes from a mixture of kind of evangelical propaganda and a general bias towards the past, in which we think of them as very simplistic and stupid people. And they were not simplistic, and they were not stupid, and they were, in fact, just as complicated as contemporary people, as you or us, hence why I think Winesburg is such a great book. But to that, but because of those biases, because of that evangelical idealization of the past, because of that general bias against the past, we have this idea that the people of the past were almost sexless, that they were very prim and proper, and they didn't do dirty and naughty things. And that is absolutely not true. In fact, a 1919 review of the book, of Anderson's book, from the Chicago Tribune states, these stories of Winesburg, Ohio, are practically all concerned chiefly with the sex life of the inhabitants of the Ohio village, of the doctor, the bartender, the school teacher, the young reporter, the hired girl, the bumpkin lad, the village sport, the woman hater, of everyone in this drab community where there was little incentive to sublimated desire, and where emotion was all the more intense for being defeated and repressed at every turn. This book really is... I don't think... Oh, no, let me rephrase that. This book is not exclusively about sex. It is not, as Burton Rasko of the Chicago Tribune stated, exclusively about sex. It's not about sex. It uses sex, however, because sex is something that people do now and did then, and it's a very human thing to do, and it uses the sex to show its more realistic. It uses sex in order to further those themes. But in so doing, I think it is an interesting point of talking about, and something that I want to talk about more about here. This is going to be another video where the algorithm does not like me because I keep talking about sex, isn't it? Shit. Oh well. It is what it is. We do it. What are you gonna do? I'm not gonna not talk about the book, you know? This is for adults. We're all adults. We might not be adults. You might not be an adult. You should be an adult. Baby, I don't know. I'm not judging. I don't fucking care. Do whatever you want. It's not my problem. But more importantly, we're going to talk about this book that was written for adults, like adults, because that's what art is. Art is... it is doing a disservice to art and to ourselves as people to limit our understanding of the world around us based off of the prurient nature, or the anti-prurient nature of business conglomerates. Fuck them. Unfortunately, that means me too. No, I will say, this is not some TikTok, romantasy book. There's not graphic depictions of sex. It is mostly just a fade to black kind of thing. But it is important that it is very open about the fact that though it is fading to black, they are having sex. It's kind of like the old Hays Code movies when you would see two people kissing on like laying next to each other in a background. It would fade to black, and you were supposed to know, yes, they did the deed, without actually showing it. That was the point. But Anderson, though tasteful, though he does not graphically describe things, does pretty frankly discuss the sex of the characters, the unwedded sex, the premarital sex, the ex-marital sex, out of marriage sex, the sex within marriage, the sex out of marriage, premarital sex, postmarital sex, all that stuff. That is all talked about with a frankness which you do not see in most books, and which is what Rasko of the Chicago Tribune was talking about when he said that this book is all about sex. And it would, I think, if you take a prurient look at the book, you would see that you would start to think that it was all about sex. Because again, the book is very frank about its discussions. In the story Adventure, Alice Hidman, a local shopgirl who finds her life passing her by, is discussed as, quote, when she was a girl of 16 and before she began to work in the store, Alice had an affair with a young man. The young man, named Ned Curry, was older than Alice. He, like George Willard, was employed on the Winesburg Eagle. For a long time, he went to see Alice almost every evening. Together, the two walked under the trees through the streets of the town and talked of what they would do with their lives. Alice was then a pretty girl, and Ned Curry took her into his arms and kissed her. He became excited and said things he did not intend to say, and Alice, betrayed by her desire to have something beautiful come into her rather narrow life, also grew excited. This is the kind of way that Anderson talks about sex. It is frank, it is honest. You see the reasons why the characters have sex. You see Ned Curry is, he wants to get laid, so he tells stories, he says what he needs to have sex, and Alice, knowing that he's lying to her, says, yeah, that's okay, because I too want to do it. And that's the way that Anderson talks about sex. Interestingly enough, where a weaker writer might use that kind of frankness to then punish his characters, to show why having sex was a bad thing, to take that kind of purity culture evangelicalism and say, nah, see, modern times, they're no good. Anderson doesn't do that. I mean, don't get me wrong. In the story Adventure, Alice Hinman does not have a happy life, but it's not because she has sex. In fact, it's the absolute opposite of that. It's because she puts too much emphasis on this sexual encounter. It's because she cares too much about it that she lets her life pass her by. The problem for Alice is that she, quote, could not have understood the growing modern idea of a woman's owning herself and giving and taking for her own ends in life. Alice's problem is that she never takes charge of her own life. A more conservative author, an author more concerned with the moral fiber of America would say that Alice's problem is that she didn't wait for marriage. But Anderson pretty much comes out and says that, no, you don't have to wait for marriage. It's not about waiting for marriage. In fact, you shouldn't wait for marriage at all. You shouldn't wait, period. You should go out and grab life and do the things that you want to do. If you want something, you should take it. Go for it. And that includes women. Despite Sherwood Anderson treating sex as if it's a very normal thing and that it is an okay thing to participate in, and despite the fact that he does not ever punish his characters for having sex the way a more conservative writer would, that is not to say that he treats sex as if it is nothing. And in fact, in the story Nobody Knows, we see George Willard's first sexual experience. George Willard being a stand-in for the author himself and somebody who most prominently comes and goes throughout all of the stories. He is often the one that the stories are being related to. The characters are telling him their stories because he is a writer for the local newspaper. So he gets a lot. So he participates in a lot of these stories. But George Willard, in Nobody Knows, George Willard is an active participant. It is the story of his first real sexual experience with a woman named Alice Trunnion. Now, George Willard is of a higher class than Alice. Alice is very coded as being a very low working class woman. She's somebody who is described as having rough hands because she's constantly doing dishes and laundry and that sort of thing for her parent or for her father and other people, because she's very relatively low class compared to George, who is working on becoming a professional writer. His parents own the local hotel, that sort of thing. So there is a class difference there. And I want to make that clear when we talk about this. Because in the story, you can see that George goes out of his way to be like, in order to be a man, in order to grow up, which is a theme of the short stories, is George's path to growing into becoming a good man. So early on, he thinks to himself, in order to be a man, I have to have sex. And in order to have sex, he goes to Louise Trunnion, somebody he doesn't really care for, but somebody he knows will put out for him. And throughout, you can see how nervous he is, how kind of upset he is by the whole thing, how he doesn't, how he's not sure of himself until you get to the end of the story. It's after they've done the deed. He's walking along and he wants to boast because he wants to be like, oh yes, I've become a man today. I have joined the race of men. And he goes through the town looking for other men that he can talk to and boast about his sexual exploits. And he doesn't find anybody because it's pouring rain. And he begins to rethink what he's done. Quote, on the sidewalk at the side of Winnie's dry goods store, where there was a high board fence covered with circus pictures, he stopped whistling and stood perfectly still in the darkness, attentive, listening as though for a voice calling his name. Then again he laughed nervously. She hasn't got anything on me. Nobody knows, he muttered doggedly and went on his way. Even in his realization that what he's done is wrong, it's vaguely wrong, he's still thinking in the kind of way of... Sorry, my cat almost kicked my computer off the bed. He's still thinking in the way of the moral certitude of the times, right? He's still thinking, well, she took advantage of me, or I took advantage, or sorry, rather, I took advantage of her, but what is she going to do? She's just a poor woman. She's not going to do anything about it. Because he can't really accept the fact that the real problem is not her. She consented. She willingly had sex. That's not a problem. And we see that in the story itself, that she was like, yeah, okay, fine, I guess. But he realizes that what he's done, he has hurt himself in having such casual romantic experience, and he can't accept that, so he puts that off of himself and onto her, and then dismisses her because, of course, she's a poor woman, so it doesn't matter if he's hurt her. Which I think is fascinating. It's just this fascinating kind of milieu of thought gets going on in what is effectively a 3-page story. Now, lest you think that he actually did hurt her, I do think it's important to note that she did willingly go along with it. Through when he first talks to her, he calls out to her and she looks at him and is like, okay. And she goes out walking. And then at one point, she began to quibble. You think you're better than I am. Don't tell me. I guess I know, she said, drawing closer to him. Like, she fully understands what's happening, what she's doing. She fully understands that George is trying to use her. And honestly, I think part of it's her going along with it might in fact be part of what is George's problem, because George views women and he puts them on a pedestal, right? In that way that men do. He puts her on a pedestal and sees her as tries to imagine her, despite knowing perfectly well that she's willing to put out. He still puts her on a pedestal and views himself as the chaser and her as the chasee. The fact that she says, no, don't worry about that, we just do it. The fact that she almost puts him on the back foot. And I think part of that is why he kind of spirals afterwards, right? He almost views himself as a victim because it wasn't supposed to go that way. It was a very unsatisfactory sexual experience. Yes, he had sex. Great, wonderful. But it didn't turn out the way it was supposed to. He was supposed to be the one taking advantage of her, not her taking advantage of him. And this is why at the end he talks about how, oh, well, she doesn't have anything on me. She can't prove that we had sex. Because he's sitting there thinking, well, because he's sitting there thinking, did I get taken advantage of? Did this go poorly for me? Again, as I said, this all blows over. George gets over it. Alice Trunnion never shows up again in the stories because that this is her story. This is the story in which she exists in. But I think it is a fascinating look at the views of sex, right? Because it's not, while Sherwood Anderson does use sex as something that happens. It is something that does happen, but it's also something that is extremely confusing for the characters and is very complicated for these people to deal with within this society, this much more repressed society. I swore to myself this was going to be a short video, so I'm cutting out some of the discussion because while I find it very fascinating, I want a short video. God damn it! It's going to be a short video. God damn it! We're doing this. We can't talk forever. I mean, we can't. You should. If you've watched this far in the video, thank you very much. And I hope that you like the video and subscribe to the channel. And more than anything, I hope you comment and talk. If you've read this book, please talk about what you think about the book, because I love talking about books, and this is something that I love to do. And if I have to speak into the void, then so be it. But it's better if you talk, if you comment, and then we can have a discussion. That is much more my speed. This is a good book. It's a good book. It's a good short story. It's relatively short. If you've never heard of it, I hope that this inspires you to read it. I hope that you go out and read it because it is very good. And it is something that I've never seen anybody talk about before. I've never talked about it in school. I've never seen anybody talk about it online. I hope people will read it. It's very well written, and I think it deserves a higher place in the canon of American literature, if there is such a thing, which is debatable. The idea of literary canons is iffy, but that's neither here nor there. The next video is going to be about The Adventures of Augie March by Saul Bellow. Another book that you never really hear people talking about, but which was lauded as the great American novel at the time it was written. So stay tuned for that one. Hopefully it won't take me too long. That'll probably be a longer video. It's a longer book. It's a more complicated book. Until then, though, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much. I'm Steven. This is Reading with Steven. Please go out and keep reading because it's fun.